Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad to see you all joining us for today's conversation. Today, we're going to be talking about how we survive, right? And how we survive within our grace. And as the title of today's workshop says, with alchemy and agency. This morning's offering is through the Coping with Corona Collective. The Coping with Corona Collective is an emergent community response that came up at the beginnings of this pandemic for us in North Carolina around March. And we all started coming together in conversation around what this impact was going to mean for our loved ones, for our communities, and for our movement efforts, which connected many of us in this work for years. So we're using these online spaces to bring people together where we can connect, where we can learn and support each other through our fear, our grief, and our confusion. Over the past month and a half, we've had offerings brought through healers, policymakers, therapists, faith leaders, organizers, cultural workers. The space has been amazing. It's been intimate, it's been profound, and we remain committed to each other and to being in solidarity even through our social isolation. So welcome to today's session. I'm so very much looking forward to this conversation. COVID-19 presents a new set of challenges and opportunities for our world. And despite the struggles and adversity that we feel and witness, we know there is a means for survival beyond scarcity, beyond hoarding mentalities, and that there are possibilities for grounding, resilience, and new pathways. And so today we're going to be joined in a discussion around centering the perspectives of Black, Indigenous, and people of color on surviving with the lens of alchemy, agency, and choice for the future. I'm so grateful and humbled to be able to introduce you to Sufia Ikbal-Doucet, pronouns they, them. Sufia is a storyteller, an antidote provider, a medicine maker, and a queer Southern Muslim brown femme who weaves these paths together in working toward liberation for themselves and their communities. Sufia believes that connecting to the magic, mystery, and beauty of the world around us is a powerful agent of change. Their work revolves around subverting the dominant narrative with the most basic of medicines like dandelion, documentary, and dance. We're also joined by Charla Rios, she, her. Charla is a Black woman living in Durham, North Carolina. She's a public health city planning researcher by training and a learner from her family and chosen family, nature, and ancestors, known and unknown. She's also part of an artist collective known as Brainchild and works as a community marshal with the Ready the Ground training team. And today we're going to be having a conversation that for me feels so deeply necessary and resonant and personal. And I'll share with you that I came to this work of offering the Coping with Corona Collective space one night in my altar room when I was completely just breaking down with the overwhelm of what we were collectively facing and what I was personally facing and what I worried about my people facing. And, I've had waves of that type of reality for myself, as many of us have over the past however many weeks. And this morning I had another one. I think I read a number of headlines that just, it got me, they got me good, and it broke me down. And this morning in my kitchen, as I was literally moaning and on my knees weeping, with the realities around us and the fruition of so many prophetic visions that many of us have wondered about coming, that they are here. And I thought, I need to shower, I need to sage, I need to get grounded because there's this webinar is coming up, right? And as I was doing that, what came to me was the realization that all of my studies over the past year around embodied trauma, grief, and how it intersects with our organizing work made it so clear to me that when I'm in that really primal survival space, which is necessary and needed, that I'm not necessarily connected with my most strategic prefrontal cortex evolved brain. I'm in my fight, flight, freeze mechanism. And how much of this work ahead of us is going to really call on us to be trauma informed and healing as we're going. As we're surviving the trauma, we need to continue our healing practices, not just for our own wellness, but actually for the directions of our movements going forward, so that our survival is grounded, so that it is grounded in our humanity and our divinity and in our values. And so I'm so grateful to Sufia and to Charla for holding a space for us to be able to have that type of a conversation. So Sufia, Charla, welcome. We're gonna start by inviting you all to introduce yourselves. And so tell us about you. Who are you and what guides your living?
Great. Hi, everybody. My name is Charla Rios, she, her pronouns, and I'm excited that all of you are here with us today and making time and space in your day to be a part of this webinar. So who am I? That is, that is something I am still figuring out. But what I know for sure is that I am a Black woman living here in the Southeastern United States in North Carolina. I've lived in North Carolina for most of my life and grew up and around nature and was raised by my mother along with my brother. What guides me in my life is just living slowly and trying to live more slowly. It's something that I constantly fight against in my own life, meaning fighting against the urges to move quickly, to move fast, right? And that'll probably be a theme as we talk throughout this conversation, that the world has shown us, like, be productive, move quickly, be efficient. And I fight against that urge a lot of times by going back to where I am from, living on a farm, where things are small and tiny and simple, right? Where I came from. I think that is largely guiding my living in this moment. Also, one of the ways that I first met Marisol was through the Emergent Strategy Ideation Institute. And I remember, although we were we had some different parts of that book that we were focused on. And one of the parts that also resonated a lot with me is fractals, which are making the smallest part of your living and your being be a large part of how you show up in the world, how you show up in community, how you expect the leaders of our world to react. You also have to embody that and have that within yourself first. So that kind of has been guiding my living as I adapt and adjust to living with COVID-19. So that's a bit about myself. How about you, Sufia?
Hey, y'all. I'm super grateful to be here with you all today and be having this conversation with Charla, who is a very dear one to my heart. So some of the things that inform who I am, I'm from what's known as South Louisiana, Atacapa land. So the Bayou is somebody who has raised me, and the mountains of Western North Carolina. Cherokee land has also raised me. My heritage is Punjabi and Cajun. So that's also informing a lot of who I am and how I move in the world. And I just want to take a minute to say, excuse me, that I welcome my well and wise ancestors into this conversation, and my guides, and your well and wise ancestors into this conversation. That's a huge part of a relationship I'm really working to build and dive deeper into. And I'm also welcoming your wisdom, because everyone who's on this call is brilliant, because I already know that you already are. And I'm setting an intention of releasing perfectionism, and I'm welcoming the medicine that's needed in this moment. One of the other things that also guides me and has guided me for a long time is a practice of releasing fear. Excuse me, really working to not let fear guide who I am, and So I'm stepping deeper into that. And I think a lot about self-determination and agency and identity as we're racialized and politicized in this world. And then who I'm responsible to. And I know that I'm responsible to my kin, and relationships are everything to me. And I think of kin being, you know, chosen family, family of origin, but also the more than human kin around me. So the plants and trees and stones and everyone who has helped me be who I am is also who I think a lot about on a regular basis. Yeah, that's a lot of what guides who I am. I'm gonna stop that there.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. So the question for us to start really is, how are you feeling about survival at this moment? And what is survival for you?
So yeah, as Marisol was sharing, you know, survival, I think it's on a lot of our minds right now. And for me, one of the things that's been happening is I've been thinking a lot about our basic primary needs, you know, with these soft animal bodies that we're in, that they have needs, and then we have these other needs as well, and how to kind of reconcile all those needs together in this time. And, you know, Charla and I have been in conversation for quite a while about things like, you know, learning from people who are people like Octavia Butler, who for a long time have been telling us different things in different ways about what's coming in our world. And we've been having conversations about go packs and foraging and like, where do we go when shit hits the fan? And then what happened in that conversation for us, and I know for me, is like, well, that has to happen. But before that, you know, I'm running around in circles freaking out. So how do I go, like as Marisol was saying, like how do I go to a different place and be able to access more of my being and bring that into that conversation? So something I forgot to share is that I also make plant medicine. I don't call myself an herbalist. We can talk about why later. It's a political choice, but I make plant medicine, and that's something I think a lot about in this time, is like, how do we learn from the plants and remember what our ancestors have known about how plants are in relationship with us and we're in relationship with them, and so that we can eat from them, learn from them, heal with them. And so there's things like making plant medicine that I've been doing a lot of, and sharing that with folks as a way to help bring us back to what is it that we already know that will help us move forward. But be like even deeper than that, I've been moving into a space of deep listening and trying to figure out what do I even think about when I'm thinking about survival? And am I wanting to support the survival of the status quo? Am I wanting to support the survival of things as they've been? No, I don't. And so when I think of survival, I'm thinking about beyond me, and I'm thinking about probably not me in this body surviving even. I'm thinking about generations to come, and, you know, queer and trans youth, and beings and entities and descendants that I can't even envision, right, in generations to come. That's what I'm really thinking about when I think about survival. And so I've been thinking a lot about who do I want to be in this moment, and how do I move into being who I need and want to be, so that I can help make those things come and happen. So for me, it's about really, like, I've been kind of backtracking on myself, you know, survival. Okay, yeah, go packs. Okay, yeah, I want to make sure I have a stockpile of food. But before that, and there are brilliant people who know way more about those things than I do, and I can learn from them. But before that, can I sit with this question of what does it mean to survive, and which parts of me and which parts of our society, which parts of our communities am I trying to help survive? What about for you, Charla?
Yeah, a lot of the similar things that you have already mentioned. I do remember that conversation, and we've gone so far as like, okay, Lent, like we know Lent is a fire starter and all of those things as well. And then realized once we were presented with the opportunity of doing this webinar and sharing and having that reciprocal conversation with one another, that we needed to start way before any of that go pack making in grounding ourselves. And so I would say regarding survival at this very moment, I personally have to take it hour by hour. I thought I would be able to think about it as far as a long view, like, okay, my plan for this week. And then I was like, my plan for today. And then it got down to like, my plan for this next 30 minutes, this next hour, this next 20 minutes, whatever that time increment is. Because I found myself so overwhelmed with all the uncertainty. One of the other things I wanted to share with you all was something that I wrote from my journal the very first day. It was kind of this deluge of feelings and on paper, just saying how I felt. And so I wrote on March 18th, today is March 18th, 2020. Today is the second day I've been at home due to a pandemic known as coronavirus or COVID-19. This journal is devoted to being in right relationship with other people and myself, yet this has been the most uncertain time I've ever experienced in my lifetime. I never thought I'd see something like this within my lifetime. On March 18th, I cried, crying from the anxiousness and overwhelm of the things I can't see and the potential for problem solving I don't want to do. And that was all I could write that day. Of course, as time has gone on, I've been able to write and share more and be able to look back over that time. But just in that one day, I remember being so riddled with anxiety that I needed just to get it out and survive in that way. So for me, survival looks a lot like writing, like walks in the woods, like sitting at the base of a tree and not thinking about anything else, like working a 4-hour workday, to be completely honest with you, as I am a person who is working from home, and being okay with that and not putting pressure on myself to feel like I need to thus make up that extra 4 hours somewhere else, right? Because that's already a white supremacist, like capitalist mentality to have, to this idea of you must work 8 hours. And in order for you to be valued as a person, you must work 8 hours. That is, excuse my language, it's a whole bunch of bullshit, like to even believe that and have to fall in line with that. So survival with me is like constantly telling myself and fighting against those urges that I had or mentioned in the first part of this discussion, to feel like you must be this person. No, you don't. You need to do what you need to do in order to make it through that next hour, make it through whatever time period, boundary, whatever it is that you're setting for yourself. So that's what survival looks like for me right now.
I feel that, Charla, so much. And when I'm talking about like, what are the things that we're trying to help survive? I think about exactly what you're saying. Like, I'm not trying to help white supremacy survive. Right. So what are the ways in which I can take that out of my nervous system, out of my body, out of my daily life, out of my daily rituals and practices? And what you're talking about like saying no to the pressure of productivity, that's like a brilliant tactic of resistance in my mind. It's beautiful.
I love this conversation so much, because that this thing has been pressing on me, like, what parts of me am I trying to make survive? What parts of the old world am I trying to, rescue, if at all possible? And what am I letting go of, actively letting go of, from the small, minuscule things around my home that I'm grieving and letting go of, right? Like, oh, well, if this goes on, I'm going to lose this, to the large thousands of people around us that we're going to physically lose from this reality. And what is the cost of surviving this body versus surviving an ancestral line towards liberation, right? Like, and the fact that we're being called to make those kinds of decisions in these times. And I think that the question around how we stay grounded, how we stay in our strategic mind, our empathetic mind, our most evolved mind, when we are constantly being reactivated in our trauma, is some of the really important work, because not only does the trauma get encoded in our DNA, but so does the medicine that is created in this time. So as we're being activated, right, all these terms like apocalypse and new world and the world that we know it is gone, you know, all these ideas are floating around on social media and in our conversations. What are your musings and thoughts around these conversations?
Yeah, so this is something Charla and I've been talking about a good bit, actually. It has not been sitting right with me at all to be hearing a lot of people talk about like apocalypse and things, this being the end of times. I'm doing this dance internally of holding the realities of this moment, that there are things happening in this moment that are not the same as they were a few weeks ago, and that life as we know it in so many ways is totally different. And I'm also holding the reality that so many of our ancestors have been through so many things so many times, and apocalypse has happened for so many people around the world in so many ways. And it just feels like a very colonial, Western, white supremacist mindset to be thinking of, like, I mean, to be totally real, if I'm just gonna be really real, and like I'm having a day of full transparency, so if I'm gonna be really real about things, it feels kind of like in a lot of ways a certain group of white people are having a hard time with some things, and now it's the end of the world for some people, right? And for me, I just want to honor the legacies of so many people who've been through so many things, and have made it through, right? So many people haven't, and that's where I go back to that idea of what is survival. And I want to honor the legacies of people who, you know, for whom colonialism and so many things have been apocalypse. So I'm coming from that place with this question, and also sitting with, you know, how many people are experiencing atrocious things right now because of this virus, literally losing family members, losing access to resources, you know, consequences that we aren't going to see for even, you know, maybe even years to come. So I'm definitely holding all that at the same time. And I've been thinking a lot about how folks have been talking about this as like the great equalizer. And in fact, for me, it feels like this is the great spotlight, just shining a light on on these inequities and oppressions that have been happening. Like, they haven't gone away. They're only exacerbated in this time, in my mind. And the way that I've been kind of working to approach this is feeling totally not okay on some days and totally not okay in some hours. Excuse me. And then in other moments, feeling really grounded and really ready. Like, there's certain parts of me that feel like they've been getting ready for a big change, a big moment of reckoning for a while. And as one of my dear ones, Dr. Parker T. Hurley, said at a meeting that we had when this first started with our chosen family, that this feels like a time of harvesting. And that really resonates with me, that this is a time where I'm drawing on things that I've been learning and unlearning and planting for years. And one of the ways that that's been tangible is, one of the first things that happened is that we got together with our chosen family and talked about, like, what do we have that we can give each other? What do we need that we can get these needs met by each other? Realizing that we have a network already in place that so many people who maybe live outside of a queer sort of politic may not have. How many of us are growing food already? How many of us have already been thinking about phone trees or things like that? Like, what are the things that we're already pulling on? And then for me internally, also just a lot of the work of working to unlearn colonialism within my body and nervous system, like, that's showing up now. I'm reaping from that in this moment. And so I'm thinking about ways to lean into that more and more. And I've also been thinking a lot about how many folks around us have medicine, literal plant medicine, or, you know, emotional medicine, or whatever that's needed for these times. And this feels maybe like a non sequitur, but the thing that's coming to mind that I want to share is that Instagram has been giving me lots and lots of ads lately for, like, crystal bowl meditations and herbalism 101 courses that are popping up all of these places. And I'm holding so much respect for folks wanting to dive into this kind of work. And I'm also wanting to recognize, again, the legacy of people who've been doing that work for a long time. And how do we lean into the elders and folks who've been doing different healing work, people who are therapists, people who have been building up these skill sets. Like, I want to make sure to honor those people who've been doing that work for a long time. Because once again, white supremacy is not absent from this moment. And so it will show up again in us looking for these different places of healing if we're not careful. Yeah, so those are some of the things I'm thinking about around that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the both and, right? It's like the idea that, no, this we have lived through, as Black and brown people, several apocalypses. Our ancestors have it because we are descendants of them. We have also been through that, right? And so to insinuate like this is it, this is capital A, the apocalypse, is no, it's not. It's not, because for one, we know what our people have been through. Slavery, in my instance, right? There's that legacy of slavery, or that establishment of slavery, and to insinuate that in itself was not an apocalypse is kind of, it's ludicrous to me, right? Like, to insinuate that this inconvenience in some ways, right, for some people, and I don't want to insinuate in any ways that this isn't a hard time, that this isn't a transformative time, that people's lives aren't being lost, right? Because we know that is the case. And this is not the worst time that this country has seen before, in my view, in my opinion. And with that, I think it's difficult to insinuate that, because a lot of this, as I feel like, if I heard you correctly, Sufia, leans on the fact that there's been some inconveniences, right? There have been some inconveniences in the sense of, no, we can't just order things and they're at our door very easily. No, we can't have what we want right now. No, we can't go out to the restaurant that we want to go eat at. And what does that say? I think we had a conversation earlier on about like how in some ways I didn't ask for COVID-19, but I asked to live slower. I asked to have a livelihood of living much slower than I did. And no, I didn't think it came in the form of something like COVID-19 or seeing death or anything like that. But I asked to have a slower life. I've asked to be able to meditate in the morning. And now I do have that with the lifestyle I acknowledge that I have. And what does that say? Like, if I go back to any of the things that I used to do, like being so reliant on Amazon and the nuances that all of us have within ourselves, right? This is an opportunity, perfectly, yes, as Angel said, this is an opportunity. We did get what we wished for. I think there's a few of us in movement spaces that have been asking for a lot of the tearing down to happen. And why did we think that this tearing down would be so pretty when it came along? Why did we think it would fit neatly into a box? Why did we think that it would look like these things are going to break down and I'm going to have all my needs met? Like, and I just want to acknowledge that this is I want to acknowledge the weight of this time, and also acknowledge, yes, the world as we know it now is gone. And in some ways, yes, we have asked for this. I know that I have asked for this to be the case. And what does that mean for us moving ahead? So that's some of the things that I am thinking about. Again, not trying to be insensitive to anyone's circumstances or the crisis at hand, but acknowledging that, yes, our ancestors have been through something like this already. And also, I've asked for this in some ways.
Yeah, it's just one of the things that has been coming up for me over and over is this idea of duality. Like just when I am in my, touching grief is also when I touch the deep tenderness of love. Just as I'm losing things, it's brought into stark relief that with which I value, just all of this duality. And so I think that one other duality for me is what it has meant for me during this time to be, because the other thing I prayed for and have been praying for is to understand the prophecy, understand the unfolding, understand my role in it, and to be of purpose in this dismantling of empire, right? But knowing also what the true human cost and sacrifice of that is, but then also knowing that we come from blood that has done it. And so we carry all of that into this. So as I'm practicing all of that, I've recognized that one of the things I have to allow is for that experience of terror, of trauma to flow through me in a way that there's a lot of allowance, but then also to not get attached to that being the state of being within which I must now live, and allowing there to be joy again, allowing there to be love again. And that's a process of self-love that I hadn't allowed myself in the old world, that now is just like required because there's no outsourcing of it. I can't consume my way out of it. I can't partner up and relate my way out of it. Like I'm here in quarantine, like with it, So I've had to learn a lot of tools for grounding, and I'm wondering from the two of you, what are the tools that have kept you grounded in this moment? What helps you not feel like a balloon in the wind, which is such a great metaphor for just total dissociation from our bodies, right? Just like out there. What are resources that you would share with the rest of us about how you all practice grounding during all of this?
Yeah. I think one of the things that it's funny, that journal entry that I read for you all a month later, this, I don't know if you can see it, but this was my journal entry.
Beautiful, Charla.
Which was just a bunch of wildflowers. So nature has been a huge teacher in this moment. Like the grounding of the trees, like to see the trees truly, like maybe some of you all have seen all the thunderstorms that have been happening, at least here in Durham, but how much the trees can sway and adapt in the wind, but they are so rooted in the ground that you don't worry about them like coming up for the most part, right? And how can I be more like those trees? How can I be able to adapt and move around, but also be grounded and rooted enough? And also knowing that trees are talking to one another right under the ground with their root systems. They're talking to one another. They're like, hey, Sufia, this is going on with me. How about you? How can I support you? So they're made even stronger by each other. So both nature, I've been sitting around a lot of rivers and having that energy of water carrying things away from you. So releasing some of the old ways of thinking that I had. And I'm sure that we all carry in our psyche in that way. And just being connected to other people has helped me ground. So people like Sufia and so many other people that are on this call as well that I've connected with over the last several weeks that have just checked in and not, and that's okay too. I want to also acknowledge that as far as checking in, it's okay if you can't check in on every single friend. I mean, it is it's a pandemic, right? So it's kind of hard to find the space even within that to do it and so forth. So other resources I think that I want to share. I do also take plant medicine and appreciate all the gifts that Sufia has taught me over the years that I have been learning more about plants and foraging and so forth. So I've been drinking a lot of Tulsi and just being in the yard and taking tinctures as needed. I've been reading a lot, so I brought some of my books that I would recommend if you have time or enjoy reading. As we talked about and Mari put in the chat, Emergent Strategy, if you have not read this book or read parts of it, it is an excellent book, and it talks so much about this exact time that we're in and the connection to nature. There have been, of course, Octavia Butler books that I've been reading as well. So all of her books for the most part. And then because I'm feeling much more in tune with nature and the way that nature can teach us, I've been reading some of the oracles in Alexis Pauline Gumb's book each morning. So that has been helpful. And this book is called Dove. So those are some of the resources that are helping me in addition to tinctures, crystals, sitting, grounding in nature. How about you, Sufia?
I love all those. Of course I do. The tree metaphor really sticks out to me too. It's something I've been thinking about, is like how to be sturdy enough and rooted enough to be able to sway. Yeah, when I think about this, I'm thinking about, this is where agency comes in for me. And I think I'm still working with this idea, but it feels to me that despair, my experience of despair is a very personal experience. I get very me focused and very like tuned into my ego when I think about despair. And so the opposite of that is like, it's actually really humbling for me to think about, to turning that outward and thinking about, I'm still sitting with the idea of hope. I'm not quite sure what I think about hope, but turning that outward, you know, and this is where I realize that I have a choice, is what I'm trying to say. It feels like that's where my agency comes in, is that there are realities around me that are very intense, realities around all of us that are very intense. And what we choose to do with them is the transmutation, is the alchemy, is how we move from being in one state to another state. So as I've been thinking about that a lot, one of the big things I've been working with is consent, actually, and thinking about informed consent. From, you know, immediately right afterwards, when we had our conversation with Chosen Family, the conversation was, you know, who are we choosing to be around and who are we choosing not to be around? And if I'm choosing to, you know, isolate, this was in the early days when we were still making those choices in different ways, but if I'm choosing to isolate and you're not choosing to isolate, you know, do I get to consent to who you're being around, you know? But also consent as far as like, how much news and information am I going to absorb today? Like, I get to choose how much information I listen to from, you know, the Orange Man in the White House. And, you know, that's different from being uninformed. I'm not trying to say being uninformed, but like, I get to choose how much I take into my nervous system and into my body. Because going back again to like, if I'm not regulated, I'm not really helpful for myself or anyone else. And then thinking also about, like how I'm choosing to then show up for others. And so something that's been really helpful for me is I have a bit of a process that I'll share really quickly. First, to get grounded and remember that I have a body, or that I'm in a body, or that the body's in me, however you want to think about that. And so laying outside on the ground, being outside, like Charla was saying, a lot of those things have been really helpful. And then remembering again that this body needs things in order for the brain to function or the spirit to function. So eating, sleeping, really basic stuff like that. Plant medicine for me is huge. Smells are huge. Soft things, being comfortable in those ways. And then from that state, then trying to name feelings that are coming up for me. So that's like then an going inward process. So like looking and seeing what's happening for me. What am I feeling right now? Can I go into that and investigate that and name it and give it space? And sitting with like, what can I control and what can I not control? What is it that needs to be released from my control? And then I can make adjustments from that place. So what out of what I can control, do I need less, you know, screen time? Do I need an earlier bedtime? Do I need to drink less wine? Like, what is it that I need that will help me feel a little better, so that then the next step for me is then going outward. And so then being able to have a little more creative expression, which for me is such a spark. If I'm able to even like rearrange things on the top of my dresser, or pick a few flowers from outside and make an arrangement, for me that sort of starts the process of it's like it's a catalyst for more creative expression and turning me outwards once again, instead of being stuck inside in my despair. Dancing around the house has been really good for me, or just connecting to loved ones. And then moving towards bigger things of like sharings like this, you know, or sharing art or different things like that. And then being able to recognize the ways in which I need to show up in my communities and for people. So that's a little bit of a process that I've been kind of engaging on a regular basis. And some days I don't get past laying on the ground outside. Like there's been a lot of days I've been literally laying on the ground outside, and that's what I could do that day. And then other days it feels much, there's much more available to me.
I think it's so interesting that you were working on these ideas and you said, I don't know what I think about hope. Because I've been thinking a lot about what does it mean to hope? What does it mean to hope in my small human lifetime? That I hope I'll be okay, or I hope, and I've wondered to myself, what am I hoping for? In this way that's interesting, that like mortality was always present, but I just took time for granted. I took space for granted, and now I question, like when I'm afraid, what is the thing, the more that I'm waiting for, that I need to stick around for? Or can I look at the life I've lived and say, that was a really beautiful life? And when I look ahead, I think there's a lot of folks that are out there trying to generate purpose and meaning in their lives, even now. And I think that that's true in an escalating intensity of this crisis, that people will always try to find some meaning and purpose in their lives. Mm-hmm. And some of that is to get through the day, but some of that is a statement of hope, right? Anyway, like given this idea that we may or may not survive physically, but that we hope that people will, and that we will have contributed to some new iteration of wellness for humanity, right? Where do we go from here? Where do we go from here? And what are the futures that you want to create in those moments where you're generating purposefulness and hopefulness? Like, what is the vision you see?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Speaking from my experience, has largely been, can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Just speaking from my experience, that I am thinking about is knowing that I've kind of spent this time, again, I do have kind of the privilege of working from home at this time, but also along with that, being able to do the things that I have wanted to do, as far as being outside more, meditating, journaling, spending time speaking to my mom and my father-in-law and my ancestors that have passed, that I have always wanted to like cultivate some relationship to them, being on a higher plane than me. And I think from here, I'm thinking about that in my own internal life, like the ways that even once we move past this and get back to normal, or whatever normal is, that I can still tap into those things, even when I'm being asked to pick up the pace again. In some ways, I hope that never happens again. I hope it doesn't happen, that we can still maintain some of the slowness that I'm seeing a lot of people be able to experience. Thinking about the larger world at play, knowing that we are in a capitalist system, and knowing that's something that I don't necessarily agree with, but live in, I'm hoping that the future for us is also slow. So again, thinking about fractals, I am slower, and I hope that the world around me is much slower, that we can, in general, reduce our need for something like right now, immediately. I ordered it today, I expect it at my door by Saturday. because the very people that are providing that for us are the ones who are also subject to, in this case, Amazon's rules of having terrible pay, terrible work hours, terrible health benefits. I think there's some centers that are even seeing cases of COVID and they're still sending your packages anyway, those kinds of things. That is unacceptable. That's unacceptable in the future that I see. The fact that we are relying more on maybe farmers or some of our local markets, our local grocers versus our bigger stores, our bigger box chains in some respects. I hope that we remember who was there for us once we get past this, right? It was not Amazon. It wasn't these bigger corporations that are still getting bailouts. It's the smaller groups, the smaller farmers, the smaller companies that were here that were able to assist us to the extent possible. At least that has been, again, my experience versus the larger big box stores, those kinds of things. So I just hope that we don't too quickly forget, as the human mind tends to do, of what we have gone through and what we have been shaped by. And because I feel like if we forget that and we go back to still patronizing some of the same places that we always have, we're going to be right back where we were. And it's going to be even more detrimental than it has been. If you think this is bad, it will be worse for us afterwards. If we don't learn. I feel like this is, I know so many people have so many different belief systems. I believe that we are being shown something. And again, it's not to minimize the fact that people have died or people are being impacted by this in ways that are very hard. I don't want to ever ignore that. And at the same time, I feel like we're being shown what we should have been doing the entire time. And now that we have this opportunity to move forward with that, if we go back to doing the same thing again, we will be shown again what we should be doing, and it will be much worse. It's going to be much worse. And that is something that I've been thinking about, dreaming about, and just wanted to share with everyone.
Yes, Charla, you speak in my mind. Yes, you said the things in my brain. I'm just letting that sit, because that's really powerful. That feels anyone who knows me well knows that I resist urgency because I don't like urgency, but that feels urgent in a way that is something to pay attention to. Like that feels like something that I really, really want to integrate into my system, so that, yeah, like you're saying, once this changes, whatever way it changes next, that I don't do the same thing that I was doing before, and that we don't rely on the same things that we were doing before. Yes, 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 yes.
Sufia, can I say one quick thing? I also want to just lift this because we have probably at this point also heard that if you are in the state of North Carolina, there's a phase of us reopening, and also just to be mindful, yes, that is a recommendation, and follow your own guidance at this point about whether it is best for you to go outside or go to that thing or participate and so forth, to follow your own inner intuition that you have already, regardless of what you're being told you should or should not do, just as a own personal recommendation.
Yes, exactly.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's perfect. That's exactly what I was going to speak to, actually. That's where I go next. That's what comes up for me is because I have the privileges I have, and I'm able to hopefully rest in this time and dig deeper into my internal world, and I'm able to make more plant medicines and do all the things that I'm doing. That feels like my work right now, because it's my responsibility to be ready for what comes next. And that's how I'm sitting with this question is, I really respect everyone being where they are. And some people are in the place of, I literally don't have enough food, or my family members are sick, or whatever. And what I'm again, transparency, I'm having a little more anxiety and fear come up in these moments than I did at the beginning, because what I'm worried about is what comes next as we move into these places of, oh, go back to work. I'm thinking about who's going to feel more pressure or be more pressured to go back to work versus a lot of folks who are going to be able to keep staying at home because all of a sudden their jobs have figured out a way to let them stay at home. Side note, even though disabled folks have been asking for that forever, now all of a sudden people understand that it can happen. But like, who's going to feel the pressure to go back, right? And especially as things start picking back up, it's going to be service workers. It's going to be folks who are working for minimum wage. It's already those people. So I'm just thinking a lot about that. And so personally, in my personal life, what's next for me is making sure that I'm not missing this, as you and Angel both said, like this opportunity to be ready, to be more and more ready as much as I can be. And like tangibly, something I'm thinking about is I've become very aware of things like splinters and broken bones and little things like that. And I'm thinking about how can herbal medicine help us with those things so that those people don't end up in the hospital, and what is my role there? Like, how can I help someone not have an infected hand and stay out of the hospital so that the resources aren't being taxed in that way, right? So that's how I make it tangible in my life. But I'm just thinking about, I think everybody has things that we can do to help lessen our dependence on the systems that we know haven't been working for us and that are just all too ready to show us how they're not working for us. So I want to make sure that I'm seeing clearly and not forgetting, as you're saying, Charla, and not trying to go backwards into that. And, recognizing that, yeah, I don't want to be, I think the role of pessimism is very important sometimes. And so just to say plainly, like, I'm just thinking a lot about that we know it's Black folks who are dying from this more than others because of the systemic things that have been issues way before now, right? And so, like, how do we make sure that we're not becoming distracted by other messages that come through, and we remember that, and then we are able to live into doing something differently with that? How are we making sure that, understanding that folks living on reservations, DNA reservations specifically, folks don't have access to clean water, so how are they going to do all these things that are being recommended to them, right? Like, I'm wanting to make sure that those things are things we're holding on to in these moments, and that as we move into this, like, okay, great, let's go back out into the world and reopen, whatever that means, that it's not we're being shown things that are very important to see right now. And so I just want to integrate that into my nervous system and help other folks do the same thing.
So at this point, I'm going to actually look at Sufia and Charla and see, do you want to go into Q&A, or would you like to go into the reflection slides?
I'm okay. So I had a few questions to offer folks that maybe, I don't know if there's a way to share them afterwards and that makes more sense in this time. I'll just say one that is feeling important to share out loud, if that's okay, Charla, and then maybe we move into an answer.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, so the one that I wanted to share was, I think a lot about boundaries also. And I think we often think about boundaries in terms of what we won't do, what we don't want, what we want to keep out. And it's often like some sort of barrier or wall, that kind of thing. And I've been thinking about boundaries in terms of like how they're enabling and how they're empowering and sort of generative instead. And so a question that's been coming up for me is like, who do I want to be in this moment? Who do I want to be as I move through this? And specifically, what are my personal boundaries? What am I okay with and not okay with? What am I willing to do and not willing to do? And I feel like that's a really important question as we move forward in these times, is like, what am I willing to do personally in my own life? Am I willing to participate in a rent strike? Am I not willing to? Am I willing to house someone in my house who's experiencing houselessness? Am I not willing to? Am I not able to? But getting in touch with my personal capabilities, capacities, and willingness, so that when opportunities come up and present themselves in front of me, I know without having to think about what it is I'm ready to do, what it is I'm ready to offer my community members or chosen family or the larger world. I feel very strongly there's going to be opportunity. There already are. We have so many opportunities around us right now, but there are so many more opportunities coming for us to test what it is, our strength around our personal boundaries. Like, what am I willing to engage in? And what am I going to say, no, I will not consent to that. I will not do that. You know, like I'm willing to help make sure my neighbor's paying rent, able to pay rent so that they don't have to go into their job. You know, like, what am I willing to do and not willing to do? Feels like a really important question. So I'm just it's just an offering as one of the few questions I wanted to offer kind of at the end of our piece, as some of the things I'm thinking about, but would love to open up for question and answer.
So everybody has the ability to unmute your mic if you would like to share a question with our speakers.
I have a question for Charla. I really it really stuck with me what you said earlier about, let me go on camera because I feel like it's weird. It really stuck with me to like the earlier when you were talking about like you're only working 4 hours a week and you're just like basically not giving two fucks about making up for the rest of it. Do you have any like tips or strategies for an aspiring person who wants to let go of the guilt around that? My job is really demanding and has been even more so, which I feel like it also kind of like, yeah, like I'm helping to move resources to groups who are like supporting and like working and organizing, you know, so like it also feels like, yeah, it feels hard to just like shut it down in a sense, but like I'm also like, it's been super hard for me today, for example, to like concentrate on work. And pre-COVID times I was trying to just get to a regular like 8-hour or whatever work schedule, and post now that we're in this fucking times, it's been easier for me to not feel so guilty about not starting at a certain time of day, but the guilt is still there and I still feel like I'm very aware of it. And some days I'm good about like just kind of like letting it like not phase me, and then other days I feel like I need to catch up and like I need to like do work on the weekends and like I'm like working at 11 p.m. to 3 a.m. to like catch up or whatever.
Yeah. It's something that I do not claim to be like fully resolved at this. It's something I'm working on. So I've gotten it down to at most around like 6 to 7 hours per day. But it could be as few as like today it is 4. And that is what it will be. It took a while, honestly, to get there. Because I just had to like, I have my own like internal like talking or pep talk with myself of like, this is not normal. This is not a normal time. I should not be expected to still perform to the same level that I did when I was working full time. I shouldn't have had to do it then, right? Because I was already working sometimes 9-10-hour days. But in these times, and I feel fortunate in some ways to have an employer at this time that understands that there are people with children at home or people who have family members that they have to take care of, and are able to step away for that. But I still had to give myself the talk or the discussion of like, this is okay for you to do. Like, it's okay if you can't think straight today. Step away from the computer, go take your walk, come back later, and do that. Don't ever feel like you're not doing enough, because who knows what the other 40 people that I work with are also going through, right? Something else that I think I saw where I felt social media was really helpful, because in some ways it hasn't been always very helpful for me during this time, is I saw a post about that was kind of a rift on some of Tima Okun's work around white supremacy in the workplace. And it was kind of white supremacy, but make it remote, in this idea of like, now because you're at home, we're going to expect you to answer every email, and we're going to expect you to answer it like constant. So now, because there's something that we're at home, right? It's like now, instead of that 8 hours, you have infinite hours to answer my emails, right? That's kind of the misunderstood or misspoken agreement that has been made. And it's like, no, I will not. I still have these work hours that I work from like around 10 or 11 till around 4, sometimes less than that. And you can email me, but I may not answer you right away. And just have been working on like, what is the thing that I can do that will make an impact or complete this project and allow me to move forward. Or sometimes it's just writing down like, I will get this and this done today. And as long as I get this and this done, that is it. I don't need to like worry about what else comes along. It can wait, just like it has waited in the past. But again, that takes a long time for me. Like, it's still something that I work through and am working on to get through the workday, but totally feel where you're coming from. So.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this session has been recorded and I will make it available. I'll also make the reflection questions available on the Facebook page. It's facebook.com/CWC Collective. I'll also put that in the chat. Thank you so much, Charla and Sufia, for being here. Please know that these are completely free donation-based sessions, but we do ask that we continue building this fractal relationship where we're mutually supporting each other, we're being reciprocal. And so if you have the capacity and ability to offer some support to Charla and Sufia via Cash App, Venmo, PayPal, please do consider just an offering of mutuality and support during these times. Thank you so much to both of you for all the thought and preparation that you put into today's session, and for all the good thinking that you've been doing for so long. I know that it's been really helpful for me and given me a lot to think about, and I think that that's true of everybody that was on the call. So I hope finally that everybody stays safe, that you're feeling supported, deeply supported in all the ways, and look forward to seeing you again out in the ether. Okay, goodbye everybody.
Thank you. Bye.